Hello, friends, and welcome to the session on the fourth R or resilience. My name is Liji Thomas. I'm a technical manager with Valorem Reply. We're a digital transformation firm based out of Kansas City in the US, and I work for their India office from South India, from Kochi. So that's where you can find me on social media. So here's the agenda for the day. We will be covering what, how, and the why of resilience. So let's get started. Short story before we start. Way back in the 15th century, there used to be a Japanese military dictator, shogun as they would call it. He owned a beautiful tea ball, and one day it happened to break. He sent it all the way to China to get it repaired. I mean, think about it, how dear it must have been to him that he got it shipped right across the shores. It came back to him all fixed, all cemented, but he was heartbroken. The tea ball was nothing compared to what it was earlier. It was a poor shadow of its original image, and the shogun was terribly disappointed. The local craftsman who understood this volunteered to take a stab at it. They pulled the pieces apart, and they used a golden lacquer paint to put it back together. Not only was the shogun impressed by this, but it also gave rise to a new form of art called Kinsugi, which is renowned worldwide today. This is so metaphorically related to the topic that we're discussing today, which is resilience. Resilience in so many ways is not about putting your pieces together, building back to those pieces, and trying to cover or hide your existing experiences. More so, it's about transformation to a new being, allowing those experiences to be a part of yourself so that you are transformed to a new being. We'll come back to that thought, but let's ask ourselves, what exactly is resilience? Ask any random kid on the block, even a school-going kid, and they tell you resilience is some form of bouncing back. Yes, but sometimes bouncing back may just not be possible. Think about a person who's lost a loved one, the death of a loved one, a disability, chronic illness. In these cases, sometimes bouncing back to an existing state of being may just not be possible. And even trying to do that may leave you dejected. Instead, why not think about us bouncing forward into a new normal? Historically, resilience has always been discussed in terms of disaster management, and we've got beautiful stories from there as well. When the government of Honduras planned to create a bridge over the Choluteca River, they collaborated with some of the best minds in the world, with the Japanese engineers, and they built a bridge. Soon after the bridge was built, Hurricane Mitch plagued Honduras, and it led to mass devastation. It left the bridge untouched. But there was a small problem. As you can see from the image, the river that was flowing initially under the bridge chose to turn its course because of the hurricane. And nature has got its own ways, and it's very difficult for us to understand. We know that by our pandemic experiences ourselves. She throws curveballs at us, and we'd absolutely be dumbstruck. The river chose to change its course, and the bridge just stood there like a bridge to nowhere. If we have to compare ourselves to the Choluteca Bridge, and we're thinking of bouncing back into a normal that does not exist anymore, we could probably be in for some surprises. Instead, what we might think of is moving into a new normal. So not just being built to last, but also being built to adapt. So how exactly can we be resilient? You do a quick Google search and you find hundreds of tips and techniques from people on how to be resilient. People also might think that this is some skill or trait or talent that's just part for some blessed people. But resilience is not just for Maya Angelou or for Malala Yousafzai. It's something that you and I can develop. It's a muscle that we develop by constant exercise. And I would boil it down to two basic fundamental principles. One, accepting your vulnerability. Think about your favorite superhero and think about what makes him or her the superhero that they are. Do they have any weaknesses or flaws? I bet every single one of them has either an anxiety disorder or a depression or a dark past, maybe even kryptonite. But what makes them a superhero is not that they're not invulnerable. It's that they found their way to work around it, and that's how they save the planet. Resilience can also be misunderstood as just this all lot of inner strength. Of course it is. But a great trait of inner strength is being able to reach out for help, seeking support. You need to have a strong support system, and having that goes hand in hand with being strong yourself. Seeking support is one of the fundamental principles of becoming or working towards resilience. Such a classic example of resilience in the form of a country that's exemplified this. Japan has been plagued by natural disaster over all these decades, like tornadoes, earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanic eruptions, whatnot. They've not just survived, but emerged victorious, stronger than they've ever been before. Most of us might remember Hiroshima for the twin bombings of the city. Seldom few remember it that just 20 years, within 20 years of that bombing, Tokyo hosted its first National Olympic Games. And the man you see in the Sports Illustrated magazine cover there is a Japanese athlete who's yielding the Olympic flames into the opening stadium in the opening ceremony. He, Yoshinawa Sakawi, was born on August 6, 1945, the very day his hometown, Hiroshima, was bombed. Such a symbolic and meaningful representation of what a culture would do for resilience. And resilience, again, is not parked for just special occasions as these. It's a way of life for some people. We might forget Japan's heartbreaking loss to Belgium in the last World Cup, but many of us may remember the headlines when Japanese spectators stayed back despite their devastating loss, despite their heartbreaking loss, to clean up the stadiums and to take care of each other. These characteristics of resilience are not, again, parked for one country or one community of people. How we develop resilience can be boiled down to three characteristics of resilience. One, a staunch acceptance of reality. Two, a deep belief that life is meaningful. And most of all, an ability to improvise. The first two together can allow you to bounce back, but only the last, along with the first two, will make you truly resilient. Let's see how. First up, facing down reality. They say, don't waste a good crisis. But sometimes a crisis is just too late to start the learning. Morgan Stanley was the biggest tenant to have occupied the World Trade Centers when the September 11 attacks happened. Of the 2,700 plus employees that they employed, only 7 they lost on that fateful day. This was no luck and no accident. Years of preparedness and good leadership skills that allowed them to accept their vulnerabilities, having stationed their offices in a strategic position at the World Trade Center. They knew they were vulnerable to attacks of these sort. They practiced their mock drills with due diligence. How many of us love mock drills? And how many of us pay attention to that? So preparedness and contingency measures and facing reality is step one. 2, search for meaning. One of my favorite all-time books is Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. He's not just a Holocaust victim, he's a survivor. And Frankl's theories have been used consistently over the years, even by business consulting firms, to how to develop resilience research and strategies. One of the things that he has observed, not just himself, but other people who have survived the Holocaust, is this. The ability to accept adversity is a huge coping strategy, no doubt. But when you embrace adversity, Viktor Frankl speaks on behalf of so many victims who have made it past that mode into survival mode. When you attach a why to your sufferings, when you attach a why to the how, it makes it a lot easier. But most of all, and above all, improvisation skills when contingency plans and preparedness just fails you. The Apollo 13 team's oxygen tanks exploded 200,000 miles away from the surface of the Earth while they were making their way back. They used all their years of expertise and experience to use just stuff they could get their hands on, duct tape, plastic bags, and cardboard, to come out with a novel apparatus enough to give them the time and the space to breathe till they reach back to the surface of the earth. What could have been deemed a huge mission failure was one of the biggest learnings in the history of NASA. Sometimes we need to have your ingenuity put into place and improvisation, adaptability to get you past that fence of resilience. Resilience matters today and always, in the boardroom, in the cancer room, in the track, both for school kids, college kids, professionals, personal lives, always. Let's bust some myths here. Resilience is not just about bouncing back. It's not just about getting up. It's about moving forward, navigating into a new world, perhaps unpredictable world as well. But resilience is not just an innate capability. It is a skill that you and I can learn, that we can develop. It's a mindset. And the mindset is not one of vulnerability. It is not one of invulnerability. It can be one that you can be totally resilient and you can be totally vulnerable as well. Resilience is not just all about inner strength. Tap into your community and seek their support. Let's come full circle to Kinsugi. Kinsugi was not a story of just the 15th century. It is a story that is perfectly applicable in today's world as well. Today in Japan, there is a chain of restaurants which started under the name Restaurant of Mistaken Orders. What is unique about this restaurant is that every single waiter, every single server in that restaurant is someone who is living a life of dementia. It's interesting, if you go into that restaurant and make an order, perhaps your order could be mistaken. You might get something that you did not order for, but that's what everyone who goes into this restaurant is expecting. Something that will taste good, someone who is open and who's understanding enough of these. Let's try to be resilient. Let's try also to be understanding of people who's living that life. And depending on where in the world you are seeing this show today, I hope when life throws lemons at you, feel free to make lemonade or marmalade or pickle them up. Let's make the best of the crisis. Thank you for listening and appreciate your attention and your patience. I'm happy to take questions, if any, or feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, Twitter, or social media. Thank you. I see a question from Simone. The reason it is called a fourth R is because typically we learn 3 R's at school: reading, writing, arithmetic. My son says different R's, depending on the generation that you come from. It's reusability, recycling, etc. So I call it the 4th R, resilience, something I think we should have learned or picked up at school. Probably our formal education should have had it inculcated into our curriculum, but nevertheless, better late than never. No problem. Any more questions? Cool. Thank you so much, people, for joining, and I'm happy to stay connected. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your conference. Take care and stay safe.